Hey YouTube, this is my 1990 Mazda Miata 1.6 liter 5-speed, and I just wanted to do a brief overview of the car, share with you some lessons I've learned in my ownership, and compare it to previous Miatas that I've owned. I've had this car for a few months now and put roughly 1,500 miles on it. Prior to owning this car, I always kind of wrote off the 1.6 liter because of the smaller engine, it's down on horsepower, and because of the short nose crank issue. But once I actually started looking into that short nose crank issue online, and I felt like it's a little bit blown out of proportion, and there are still a lot of 1990s on the road that are reliable, so you just have to read up on it, know what you're looking for in order to make yourself comfortable with the purchase of a 1990 or 1991 1.6 liter Miata. And regarding the engine size, it is smaller than the 1.8 liter that came later, and it is a little bit down on power compared to the later model years. But because these cars are lighter in weight, this is a 1990 base model with no power steering, no air conditioning, no ABS, no power windows. So it probably weighs roughly a couple 100 pounds lighter than my previous 1997 Miata that I owned. So taking you around the car, these are Koenig helium wheels that I put on it recently. The 15-inch wheels give you a larger variety of tires to choose from. There's a lot more high-performance tires available in the 15-inch size. One thing you want to look for when you're shopping for wheels is lightweight wheels. So I felt like the Koenig helium wheels were offered at a good price, and they're lightweight. Right now I have the Yokohama S-Drive tires on it, which I'm very happy with. So as I mentioned, this car does not have ABS, but it does have slotted and vented front rotors with racing pads on it. Along with that, it has stainless steel brake lines and a master cylinder brace I'll show you later underneath the hood. And even though it doesn't have ABS, it still stops probably better than the 1997 that I owned. So don't let the lack of ABS put you off. It is white, and if you've never had race pads before, white does show a lot of brake dust, so that is one thing to note. I sold several of my other Miatas that I've owned, which have been a 1997, a year 2000, and a year 2006. So the first two generations I had to sell due to the rust getting close to being past the point of no return, and that is typical on Miatas in the rear rocker panel and wheel arch. As you see in this car, it was a West Coast car, and the person traveled with it back to the East Coast. So luckily I didn't have to drive too far to get it, but that is one thing that when I purchased this car that I was on the lookout for. I wanted to make sure this time around I got it right, and I purchased a car without rust. So if you are shopping for a used Miata, make sure that you take your time. There are rust-free cars out there and available. Don't be in a rush to purchase one because you feel like you have to buy a Miata today. Just keep your eye out and wait for a Miata that is free of rust. One of my favorite features with the NA Miata is the rear window, which zips out, and because, as I mentioned, this car has no AC, on a day like today where it's 95 degrees and very sunny out, you're going to appreciate the airflow that it offers you. You can tell from the lack of a wheel gap that this car is on Flying Miata racing springs. It has the Flying Miata Stage 2 Koni suspension package, which has the springs, Koni shocks, and Flying Miata sway bars front and rear. This is also my first car, my first Miata that I've owned with a roll bar. As you can see here, it is the Blackbird Fabworks roll bar, which is SCCA legal. It's a very high quality product, and I highly recommend it. I have no problems with visibility whatsoever. The one thing that does get a little bit annoying is unzipping the rear window to put it up and down. It takes a little bit of an effort. It's a little bit difficult to reach around the roll bar, and it also prevents you from pulling the roll bar, pulling the top closed with just single hand. So when the top is down, as you can see, if you did want to strong arm it, there's no way that you really could. And to unzip the zipper, you're fighting with the roll bar, especially once it gets behind your head. Manual windows really don't bother me in a car like this. Being it's so small, it's easy to reach over. What's nice about the early NA Miata is it doesn't have dual airbags, so you have a nice flat dashboard. It looks really good, looks really cohesive. You also have chrome encircled gauges, nice and simple. You get a real oil pressure gauge, which is very nice. They did away with that on later Miatas, went to a computer-driven algorithm. This car does have the Flying Miata heel toe pedals, which makes it easier to modulate the brake and throttle at the same time. The early NA Miatas, the stick shift isn't as sweet as the later NA Miatas. It's one of the things that was incrementally improved with time. They revised the synchros throughout the years, and my 1997 did shift a little bit smoother, was a little bit more of a joy to get through the gears. That's not to say this one isn't a good gearbox, it really is. It's just having had a 97 and a 2000, I feel like that manual transmission was a little bit more refined, a little bit smoother. This does have an aftermarket wheel, which is very nice. It's tri-spoke, nice bolsters. Of course, it does do away with the single airbag, but in a car like this, that's really not too much of a concern. Regarding the steering, this is non-power steering. It's manual steering rack, and I will say that I did like the power steering rack slightly more in my 1997 and year 2000. I thought it offers more steering feedback, like every crack, every bump in the pavement, every little ridge that you go over, it's sending like electric tingling through your fingers. You feel every little crevice in the road, and it really gives you good feedback. The feedback is a little bit more dull, and the steering ratio is a little bit slower. So even though it's not much of a burden at low speeds, once you're over 2 or 3 miles an hour, it's really not much of an effort at all to steer. But I don't feel like it offers you as good of feedback and feeling as the hydraulic assist. But again, these are things that were incrementally changed throughout the years and improved upon. So yeah, the transmission a little bit better in the later years. Like I mentioned, the power steering I do like a little bit better than the manual steering. Underneath the engine, we have a 1.6 liter, as I mentioned. Really don't write these cars off just because they're down on power and have a smaller engine. It's a lot of fun. It feels peppy around town. It revs freely. It actually feels a little bit better than the 1.8 liter that I had, just because it's a lighter weight car. And it's just a nice peppy engine. And it's happy to rev out, wind it out. It's a lot of fun. And you can see here it's got the new shock mounts with the adjustable Tony shocks. I don't recommend turning the shocks up too much. I usually have them just dialed up about 180 degrees to 270 degrees from all the way at their lowest setting. And again, when you're buying these cars, just look for the car that you can find that's in the best condition that you can afford. So when I set out, I wasn't looking for a 1990 or a 1.6 liter, but because this car was super clean, had modifications I was looking for, the suspension, the brakes, the roll bar, I was happy with making the purchase, and I have no regrets. So Let me know what you think about the early 1990 Miatas, if you can compare them to the later model years. And happy motoring.